Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. We are here at the ubngo.com studios, and we are excited to have another great Money and You Show today. Have a great guest who's going to be helping entrepreneurs and others understand how to create online courses and how to get those out there. So there's going to be a lot of interesting discussion about career transition, about money, and about some potential ways to earn money that you may not have thought about. So I want to just jump in and read a couple of statistics here. By 2026, the global online learning market should be worth $375 billion. It's predicted that by 2024, the U.S. e-learning market will have grown by $21.64 billion. And the U.S. owns about 34% of the online learning market platforms. And that market size was valued at $3.97 billion. These are numbers that probably they're not easy to wrap your head around, but they're big. And we know that, and it's growing. And so this, if you haven't noticed, and I tell people all the time who are, either business owners or in career transition, now is a great time because you can learn a tremendous amount on your own online at a lower cost than ever. And so that whole, I need more education or I need more skills, that problem really is solved out there right now. So I think it's a fascinating time and an important time for people who both want to learn and want to offer education. So with that, I'm going to introduce Marcio Santos, and he has been working in digital marketing when Flash and Dreamweaver were a thing, working with brands like Danone and Anker. A few years later, his love for gaming led him to become an entrepreneur and to build Latin America's largest gaming tournament and an online gaming community. From there, he took an opportunity to work with a marketing agency and brands like BMW, Scotiabank, BMO, and McCormick. When his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he carved out an exit for himself by founding the digital agency Nerd Digital, and he's never looked back. The agency has allowed him more time freedom so he can enjoy his family, and it's given him the opportunity to work with great people at 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses like Boston Comic-Con, Fan Expo, Kettle and Fire, Emmy Eats, Remedy, Kombucha, and the 10 Spot. And today he coaches course creators like Ted Seides and from Capital Allocators and Kay He from Rad Reads to grow their course businesses. Welcome, Marcio.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have you here. We had an interesting discussion, and I was very excited about you coming on and sharing some of your expertise and knowledge with our listeners. So I'd love to just start with your career transition, because a lot of people listening either want to make a career transition or are in career transition. And so would you talk to us a little about your background and how that came about?
Yes, for sure. So when I was in the agency world, I was working, 40-hour weeks. I wanted to be with my family more. I wanted to be with my mom, as you said in the intro there. Thank you for that. And being in the agency world was fun because I got to work with, established brands and work on award-winning campaigns and things like that. But when I decided to make the shift, the first thing in terms of making the transition was figuring out, okay, what set of skills do I have that are marketable that I could use, to make some income that could keep me afloat while I'm doing this transition. I think there's that important piece that everyone, when they're going through a transition, they have to figure out, like, what is the financial side of it? Mm-hmm. Then combining that with the skill set that you have, and then maybe giving yourself a time frame, right? So I think those three things are super important when you're transitioning.
Right. And was there any fear around, losing the salary that was consistent and you could count on?
Yes, for sure. The fear was there, but the knowing that I would miss a day with my mom or a week or a month was worse,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once I came to that realization, the decision was pretty easy.
Okay.
I was always pretty confident in my abilities, and it's if you're an entrepreneur today and you're listening to this, I think you could probably agree with the thought that um, why not me? Why can't I be successful as well? Why can't I figure this stuff out and and make a go at it? So yes, there's that fear, but it's almost like that song goes, I'm more afraid of not trying than I am of failing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and that's one of those things that I read and I reread. That people toward the end of their lives, their biggest regrets are the things that they didn't try to do, and so I
Mhm.
think that is, that's a great reminder that you just brought up. So okay, so how long would you say that transition took for you to start feeling like comfortable and confident that this was going to work?
So the way the way that the transition actually happened was I booked a client before leaving.
Oh,
That
nice.
was like that's really essentially how I did it. And as soon as the client agreed and paid their first invoice, then I was like, okay, this is enough for me. I'll take my savings, my last month's payment, and then plus what my client is giving me, that'll give me, I don't know, like a 3 month runway.
Okay.
And as soon as that happened, I gave my notice, my 2 week notice, and that process was put into place. And from then on, the mindset was shifted from servicing my clients at the agency to servicing my client now through my
Mm.
agency. And so, uh, but still, like when I took on that client, it was like a small web design project. I executed that. And in the meantime, I started to take as many classes that I could, right? So as many classes and courses that I could afford, from SEO to
Mm.
um, email marketing, content marketing, paid advertising. I took as so many courses, and SEO was really one of those courses that was the most eye-opening. I took a web analytics course too, which is super important. But the SEO one was a huge one and led to like the next transition after that for me.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. And you bring up some great points. I had a coach early on, and she was coaching women entrepreneurs to build coaching businesses. And when people would get too caught up in the, oh, I've got so many things to do. I've got to build my website. I've got to, do all this foundational stuff. And people would stay in that mode and spend money, and it would take forever. And her advice was always, why don't you just stop for a minute and go get a client? Because that is such a game changer when on so many levels, and all that background stuff can wait for that that client work that you really need, that is actually bringing in revenue. So I think that I just wanted to repeat that a little, because I thought that was brilliant that you got the client first before you did all the stuff that people do when they start a business. And so
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't have a website. I didn't have a brand name. I didn't have a mission, a vision, nothing. I just said, I need a client that will pay me to do something that I know how to do. And that at the point was how to make websites. So
Yeah.
I knew how to do that. I set a price, he paid it, let's go.
Yeah, I love that. So smart that actually, because there's so much investment that goes in, and you're actually bringing in revenue first and spending that, which is a really wonderful way to go. So, yeah, I love that. And then I love the learning part, because I think, as you learn, new ideas come to you. And like you said, the SEO piece, that was something where you could learn it and implement right away. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, great. Okay, so if you will continue just kind of with the story of how this progressed.
Yeah, so through that work, when I took the SEO course, that was the one of the most eye-opening for me. And I was excited to jump in and help some people, right? So after you learn something, the best way to test whether or not you've actually learned it is to put it into practice, either by teaching somebody else or taking a client or taking a project or building your own project and implementing the learnings. And so I started to network with a lot more people at that time. I wanted more clients, wanted more work. And when I was going out to these networking, either events or to one-on-one coffees with people, I didn't really have set in my mind what is the one thing that I was going to do. And this is important. Before that, I was kind of just looking for opportunities, and I would say yes to as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, a guy sat across from me. He was from an agency, a much bigger, more established agency at the time. And I wanted to learn from this guy. And he, he's like, sure. After we warmed up to each other and we had a few conversations about, where we've been, what we're doing, and things like that. He's like, okay, so what is the thing that you do? And in between when he asked me that question to whatever came out of my mouth, I was like, okay, now is the time. I have to choose one. And I was like, okay, SEO. And then I just shut up. And he's like, okay, got it. Next time I have an SEO client, I'm going to think about you. And I think that's something really important for you as an entrepreneur, to have one key transformation that you can offer to people, right? What is that one thing? If it's two, if it's three, it's too much if you're starting.
Yeah.
As soon as it's one, it just makes it so much easier for you to position yourself into the mind of that person that you're speaking with. And they can say, okay, SEO, okay, it's Marcio.
Mm-hmm.
Until this day, I no longer sell or market my SEO services, but I still have people reaching out to me saying, oh, I know that you do SEO. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I'll refer people. So I think coming to terms with this, choosing one transformation that you can offer to people is key.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I know this for myself as conversations, like, yeah, but if I'm saying no to analytics and saying no to paid and saying no to email marketing, all these other things that I can do and I can offer, then I'm just throwing away money, right? That was the conversation going on in my head. And the opposite is true. Because when you're doing so many things at a surface level, you can't really charge premium fees for your services. And somebody's not going to charge you premium if you're doing 10 things. If you're doing one thing really well, you can charge a premium, you can get it done faster, and your margins will be much better, and you'll be able to deliver better results. So that was my experience. I ended up, I think the first big break that I got with that was I worked with a project through that agency. So the guy that I had the conversation with, he passed over a bunch of clients to me, and that's actually a bit of a growth hack too, if you want to speak about that later. So he sent me some clients, and from there I just kept learning and growing, taking more courses and applying more. And yeah, I think that was like a very big part of like the past, let's say 5 years of work. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many good. I hope people are taking these little nuggets, because this is really good business education. When you're starting a business, all the things that you're saying are, I know personally how important it is, and some of these things I didn't do, and that's why I know. But focusing on one thing like that and becoming, very narrow in your message and focused, and it's much easier to communicate. It's much easier for people to hear, what your offer really is, and for you to get better at it, because that's what you're focused on. So talk to me about that growth hack. That sounded intriguing.
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, for example, if you're running an agency or you're a solopreneur, a freelancer, a consultant, and you're trying to get more clients, one way, this is what I did, and this was just with one partner, is I partnered with that agency. And so essentially what happened is they white labeled my services. And so my brand wasn't going out there, but I was getting exposure still to the clients. So I would still speak with the clients. I'd still make revenue. And what that would do is, maybe perhaps if we're talking about, let's say, brand versus performance, right? If we're thinking about, sure, you're not developing really the brand of your agency, and maybe it's not your agency's brand that's on the invoice, but in terms of all the other side, you're really learning and scaling really quickly. So you're generating revenue. You're not having to develop like any inbound or outbound efforts. Really, all the effort is being done by the agency that's passing things on to you. You're getting exposure, so you're learning much faster. The client is much bigger than what I probably could have been able to get on my own.
Right.
And so it really accelerated that. So the growth hack is, if you can find different partners that can send clients to you, and you can either pay them a commission, so that's one way to go, if you don't want to be white labeled, then you could say, look, I'll charge the client directly, but I'll pay you, 10% or 15%, whatever fee they want to charge you.
Okay.
That's a really good way to grow really fast. And you could partner with multiple agencies. So if let's say you sell SEO, you could sell your service. You could partner with a paid advertising agency. You could partner with a social media agency, an email marketing agency, a PR agency, right? So you could partner with all these different agencies that want to add another service. They'll add more revenue without actually adding any overhead to their business, and they'll be happy to do that.
Yeah. I kind of love your focus on overhead and not going crazy with the marketing costs and the overhead before you're bringing the revenue in, which is what I mostly see, is people spending a lot to make some money and usually spending more than what they're making. So I feel like, did you just naturally go in that direction, or was that strategic on your part?
It was not strategic. It was not strategic. It was really aligned with my personality. I'm very frugal.
Okay.
Like I use frugal so I don't have to say cheap. But if I'm always looking for a good deal, and I'm one of those type of people, right? I love deals and I love great offers, and I buy expensive things, but it's got to be so good. Like I don't know. Like my laptop, I'm looking at it right now. I paid a lot of money for this thing, but it is the best thing like money could buy.
Yeah.
So I think when it came to keeping an eye on my bottom line and looking at my expenses, I was definitely very careful. My wife, I'd say she's an accountant, so she's taught me a thing or two about that value equation of it's not how much you earn, Marcio, it's how much you keep.
Yeah.
So that's been in my mind for many years. She's done a good job of for teaching me that. Yeah.
That's great. That was actually my grandfather's line, and yeah, it still holds true. And unfortunately, it's not the way a lot of people actually, work with their money. But it's super smart, and I'm just listening to you talk about how you develop this business, and it's a really great approach. So yeah, that's great. I can guess your money archetypes and your relationship with money as you're explaining that, but very, very good for an entrepreneur to be able to do that. So, okay. So how did you get from SEO to course creation?
Yeah. So at some point, I got introduced also through networking. I got introduced through, actually, no, this is how it happened. I used to volunteer. Again, when I was really trying to build a network at that time, it's just one little detail that I left out. When I was working at the agency, I was new to Toronto. I had moved here from Brazil. And so building a network and having people know what I was able to do was super important for me. And one thing that I learned from a professor of mine, he said that it's not who knows what you can do, it's who knows what you can do. I think that's how the saying goes, but it's not so much that you have to let people know, it's you have to let the right people know what you're capable of.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do is network as much as possible, and I volunteered for this for a foundation here, the Toronto Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in Toronto. And through there, I met this guy, and I developed a relationship with him. And through that, several years later, he invited me to co-organize an event with him here in Toronto. It's like a meetup event for startups. And through that, I met this guy, Wilson Hung. This guy is amazing. So he brought me on to work at Kettle and Fire. They're a really important brand. They sell a category leader in the bone broth and soups category. Okay. They are disrupting and hopefully going to dethrone Campbell soups as the healthiest and best soups that you can buy at your local grocer. And they ran their organization like a startup, and I learned so much from them. And so I was able to get into there, and I was exposed to different growth tactics and growth processes in there. And through there, somebody in Wilson's network reached out to him, and then it was Kay reached out to him, saying, "Hey, I need help with SEO. Do you know anybody?" And like I said, it landed on my plate. And we started off with a small engagement, and it was super fun because when I was working with Kettle and Fire and 10 Spot and these, they're making lots and lots of money. we'd come to the, let's say, monthly or weekly or quarterly reviews, and we'd hand in our work and say, look, SEO went up X%, lead generation X%. I found this can help us grow. The team is like, awesome, good work, cool, implement, and we'll meet again. When I went to work when I did the project with Kay, we were able to work together and take his business from 5-figure launches to 6-figure launches. And throughout the process, as I'm teaching him and coaching him through different things, he's giving me like these mind-blowing reactions. He's like, man, this is so amazing. Man, I really appreciate you. Man, this really changed my business. And that energy that I got back from him was like, what am I doing? Like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
This may not be more profitable or lucrative, but that energy and that impact that I'm able to make, that's what I want. Like, this is cool. Let's do more of this, Marcio. And so really it was like through that experience, I was like, okay, well, let me just find more people like Kay, right? They're awesome people. I can have an impact and we can have a good time together and make the world better. So let's rock and roll. So that was how I got to that.
I love that. I love the whole philosophy of going after more of what you want. And I mean, obviously, you're starting to connect with sort of your own superpowers too in that. And so I think when you get that energy and those feelings, it's really important to run with those and to let your intuition kind of guide you in that direction. So, because your business evolved and partly as a result of that. So, I love that. And I really want to stop for a minute and just talk about networking because you've brought that up a number of times. And it is so important. I mean, you have all kinds of skills that you've developed from all of these jobs, but really your business growth, from what I'm hearing, sounds like a result of relationships and networking. And I kind of repeat myself over and over on this, whether you're a career changer or a business owner, but those relationships are everything. And so, and you very intentionally, it sounds like, went, out seeking relationships. But I love that you brought up the volunteer work because networking can take place anywhere. I mean, it can take place, within social gatherings, within volunteer work, within groups like the chamber, but it doesn't have to be kind of, sometimes people think about networking and they're sort of like, oh, I hate going to those groups. So go to groups that you do like what you did. And so just, a moment on networking, because I think it deserves it deserves a moment.
Yeah, I think my approach, there are many approaches out there. There is something that I teach in our program, which is what we call the audience amplifier playbook. And it's a little bit of that. So in terms of networking, you can be, if you're a careerist, let's say, and you're trying to ascend the corporate ladder, I think there's an approach to networking there. So maybe you're networking within your organization or you're networking with people that are adjacent to your market. So let's say, for example, you are a graphic designer and you could network with other graphic designers or creative directors in your agency, or you can go outside and look for other people at bigger agencies, right? This is something common. You work at a small boutique agency, maybe you're like 10, 15 people, maybe smaller, and then you network with somebody from a large agency, right? Like, so that has like, I don't know, 100 people or these global type of agencies. That's like one way to network, one, let's say, path for networking. When it comes to networking as a solopreneur and you're trying to build your brand, one way to do this is through this audience amplifier playbook, which essentially is finding other people that have an audience so that you can help. So take this as an example. This is very meta. Like, I'm on a podcast and I'm talking about my business, but at the same time, I'm trying to teach, and I hope I am, teach and give lessons from my experience that are helpful for the audience. So this is an example of how you might expand your brand, right? So is it kind of a little bit like networking, kind of a bit like partnerships, kind of a bit like, just marketing? It's a bit of a combination of those three things put together and wrapped in a nice bow.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Great examples. So, okay. So where do we go from here? How are we going to get to content creation?
Yeah, so I think the next part of the conversation is, so after I started working with Kehi, I kind of just went in and reached into my war chest of ideas and tactics and threw as many of them as I thought would work for him. And at some point, I reached this barrier was like, okay, now what do I do? We've gotten to six figures. How do we grow even further? And from there, I've been taking more and more and more and more courses. And what this has allowed me to do, and actually hire a lot of coaches too. So it's allowed me to refine my process and refine my program to the point now where I have a very structured process of helping people to get to that transformation. And the idea here is that I want to get people to six figures in 6 months. So if you have a course, or if you're just getting started with your course, you have to at least have a course idea. And I'll give you an example of this in a second. At Nerd Digital, we have an offer right now that if you sign up with us within 6 months, our goal is to get you to six figures, or we'll keep working with you until you do.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I talked about if you at least have to have an idea for a course, we worked with capital allocators about 5 months ago. And when they approached us, they had a course idea kind of on the back of a napkin idea of a course, right? So Ted, he had written a book, he has his podcast, and he took the Rad Reads course and he said, you know what? I wonder if we could do something similar. So he reached out and I asked him, okay, so show me your course, show me your modules, show me your slides, show me your materials. What do you have? And he's like, I kind of have it, kind of don't. And we worked through it. And within 3 to 4 months, he was able to launch his first course. And he did well over six figures with his first launch.
Wow. Okay.
And so I bring up that case because you could be sitting on a course and sitting on, let's say, six figures. That's kind of, just laying around hidden in your business and you don't know about it. Creating a course and marketing the course, it's not as complicated as it doesn't have to be too complicated. Essentially, there's three key parts that you have to master.
Okay.
You have to get your product right, you have to get your funnel right, and then you have to get your content right. And if you could get those three things right, then you can build an audience and launch that audience and do well with your course.
Yeah, really interesting. So can you give us a little information on what makes those things right? And I know you can't go too into depth, but just to...
Yes, for sure. So when we talk about the product, there's essentially three things that you have to get right. There's the avatar. So making sure that you're marketing your course to the right person. Make sure that it's very clear, like who is it exactly that you want to help. The second part is the transformation, which we spoke about at the beginning of the podcast, which is what is that one transformation that you're offering to people? And is that transformation valuable to them? Is that something that people are actually, have this 3 a.m. problem where they have they're waking up in the middle of the night. It's like, oh my gosh, well, how am I going to X, this week? Or how am I going to Y this month?
Right.
Is your course transformation a solution to that problem, to a type of problem like that? So that's one good framework that you can use to validate your transformation idea. Then it's messaging, right? So the final part to getting your product right is having a concise message, a concise name for your course. When we get into phase 2 and we talk about your funnel, this does not have to be super complicated. You could think up the most complicated funnels out there. Really, all you need a landing page with the lead magnet. You need to use some videos. You need to be able to nurture people that join your email list and then get them into your launch, right? So that's as complicated as your funnel needs to be. And then the last part is all about, creating the right content and building your audience. That is definitely the hardest part, the part that takes the most work if you don't want to pay for all of it, right? So there's essentially 2 ways to go about building an audience. You can either actually 3. You could pay, you could build, or you could borrow.
Okay. And
in our training, we teach all 3.
Okay. Wow. So so this 6 month to six figures program, that's what you're talking about, where you could get all of this information.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Super interesting. And so let's just talk about people who maybe are, they haven't done this before, but they are sitting on a lot of information, which I mentioned to you at the beginning of the show. The U.S. is primarily a service-based economy at this point. And so there are a lot of service providers with interesting information that they could turn into some kind of a course. And so, do you recommend this as sort of a side thing that people can do for? I mean, I'm thinking even doctors, dentists, lawyers. Everybody has something that they could put a course together around. I don't know if I said that right, but
that's an interesting question. I think that when it comes to highly regulated fields like a doctor or dentist, I'm not exactly sure. I think there are limitations on the types of courses that you can put together and you can market online, because I think, for example, if it's a degree program and you're going to be a doctor or a dentist, people that are going to work with our health, then I think there's a higher standard, and there's, for you to get a license and things like that, then maybe that's not a good fit. But for everything else in between, I think a course makes sense. And if we take a step back and we look at, you're talking about the market at macroeconomics, right? And if we talk about why the online learning space is growing and will it continue to grow, I think the answer to the second question is yes, it's definitely going to continue to grow. And that is because the complexity of work is going to continue to increase. Mm-hmm. So that's going to continue to increase. People are going to live longer, which means that we're going to have to do career changes much more often. Regardless if you're a freelancer, an entrepreneur, or you're a careerist, if you work inside an organization, you have to recycle yourself. You have to continue to learn new skills if you want to stay relevant. Mm-hmm. If you're an entrepreneur, the exact same thing. You're competing with other entrepreneurs in the market, so you have to keep upping your game in terms of how do you fulfill, how do you attract, and then how do you run your operations, right? So for all of these things, you need people in your business. Right. How do you hire? How do you convince people to come in? You have to continue to up-level your skills there. And so creating a course and learning to create several courses and optimize your course is going to be an essential part, I believe, for, it's going to play an essential part in keeping and upskilling people throughout the workplace today. Right. So, for example, there's this interesting story that Yuval Harari, the author of *Sapiens: A Homo Deus*, he talks about how, people are going to live longer. And he has this interesting story that, let's say, for example, that today you're a web designer, and let's say in 5 years you need to do a new transition because web design becomes taken over by AI. Right. Okay. The next transition may be, okay, now you're a web developer. So instead of designing, now you're coding the pages. Okay, cool. So now you're a web developer. The next 5 years, and now let's say you're 50 or 45 or something. In 5 years from now, your web developer job is going to be eaten by AI as well. And now you're going to be 50 or 55. And the next jump is, okay, now I need to do something on the blockchain. So I need to be a blockchain developer. Wow. So the transition from here to there is already way more complex. But you manage, right? So you manage to learn, and you have to do this through a course, because at a university, they probably won't create something like this fast enough for you to actually implement it. From there, then maybe the blockchain developers will also get eaten by AI. Well, what's the next step? Maybe you're going to have to develop virtual reality spaces on the metaverse. What the heck, how do you take everything that you knew from before and apply it to here? Right. In terms of the skills, your identity, what you believe about yourself. This transition is super difficult. And at this point, you're 60 years old and you still have to work and you still have to transition and learn all this stuff. It's so difficult. It's so challenging to think about through all these things. And a course is important. And there's a specific type of course that I believe is like the best solution for taking people to that transformation, which is a CBC.
So a CBC is what?
A CBC is an acronym for cohort-based courses. Okay. And the idea behind cohort-based courses is that you're not doing it alone, Michelle. You are similar to like a university class or a college class or a high school class. You're in a classroom virtually with other people. You're all starting at the same point, and you're going through a course together. And so throughout the course, you could have opportunities where you share your ideas, where you share your learnings, where you're giving and taking, and you're doing with the other class, with the other participants and the professors or teachers or lecturers in the course.
Okay.
So the reason why I believe the CBC is so valuable going forward is that of the emotional component.
Mm-hmm.
This emotional and psychological stress that is going to exist. It exists a little bit now, but it's going to be more prevalent in the future. Is that we need other people.
Yeah.
We need support. We need to be able to cry on somebody's shoulder. We need to be able to get lifted up. We need to be able to like see other people do something. Be like, okay, if Joe can do it and Mary can do it, then I can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
We need that. We cannot operate in a vacuum when things get so complex, and it's coming fast, and it's just going to come faster at you.
Right. Right. I think what you're saying is so interesting because I know for a while, especially when I started coaching, it was all about the self-study course that you could just put out there and make money from, and then, you're not a part of it except for marketing it. You're not, they're just watching videos. But and this is just sort of what I hear from people that it's become more important that somebody be in the course, maybe not all the time, but as part of it, like you said, because people tend to buy the self-study courses and not do them. So then they're turned off by the whole thing. And so so being there with them is important. And so that kind of hybrid model, I guess, you're not in a classroom live with people and they're not just watching videos on their own. That seems to be the sweet spot, I guess, at this point. Is that?
Yeah, it's definitely a model that works really well in terms of course completion.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some statistics say that CBCs deliver a completion rate of above 80%.
Wow.
Whereas some courses, if they're self-serve or evergreen, the completion rate is more like 20% or below that.
Yeah.
And so if you're course creator, or if you're somebody, example, you go back to the statistic that you mentioned, how the US is essentially a service-based business today. If you're a service provider, what you're really trying to do is help somebody do something.
Mm-hmm.
And if your real goal is to help people do something, then the course should get them to the transformation. If people buy and don't transform, I don't think you've done your job.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, maybe you've made some sales, but it's likely that you're also going to have a lot of refunds.
Yeah.
And you're also not going to have satisfied customers.
Mm-hmm.
And the product of a business are happy customers.
Right. Right.
It's really to produce happy customers. And so if you can bring them in, I think a CBC is really a path forward for creating a lot of happy customers.
Right.
It's not as high leverage as having an evergreen course, but there are ways, like you said, to have some things that are, let's say, asynchronous or recorded, and then having another part which is live, where you're in a classroom, where you're able to sit across with somebody and have a conversation and open your heart a little bit and get some help, some real one-to-one feedback, because it's all in the nuances.
Right.
Everything you do, it's the success is always in the nuances. It's never in the big things.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you have to master the fundamentals, but once you master those, it's really how do you apply it to your specific situation? What is the wording that you're going to use? What is the strategy? How are you going to pitch people? There's so many, like millions and millions of different things that you have to think through. And it's all about the nuances. And that's where a class and a coach can really help you. It's
right.
How does it apply to you? How does it apply to your situation? That's where a coaching and
right.
That support comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's so true, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. So there's nothing formulaic that you can give somebody that is, for example, about how to start a business. I mean, there's so many nuances, like you said. So this is so interesting to me, and we're running low on time, which I'm bummed about, because there's so much more to talk about. There's, I was just thinking, when you're talking, the work world is evolving and the education world is evolving, and there's so many changes going on. And I just think this is such a marvelous way for people to get more education without having to spend, huge amounts on tuition. And so this is exciting, really. So if you're somebody who, the other piece that I really wanted to talk about that I don't know if we can get to, maybe 1 minute on this, but just this idea that there's more and more coursework out there, or courses. And so the online world is becoming, really a wonderful place to go, but also very full of content. And so whether it's LinkedIn Learning or Udemy or Coursera, I mean, these are just ones that I hear about and see all the time. What should one think if they're thinking, wow, how do I enter that market?
Yeah, so that really is a conversation about it's not so much about market saturation. Really, it's a conversation about attention.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, if we're going back to this idea that you're going to offer a training and a course, and you're going to offer some coaching, for example, like in the format of a CBC, a cohort-based course, then you're going to offer way more value than a course on Udemy or LinkedIn Learning, because those are all recorded.
Got it. Okay.
So from that perspective, you can already say, okay, from a perspective of value, of what the person is getting, your course is already going to be better. So that's one way to think about it. The second thing to think about is attention. How do you get the attention of the right people? How do you teach them? And then how do you monetize them?
Mm-hmm.
Getting attention is really difficult, plain and simple, right? Getting people's attention is hard. But if you're able to capture that, then if you're able to stay loyal to an audience and solve a problem, a very specific problem, very well, it's natural that that audience is going to value you and to give you their attention and to reward you with money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that the conversation really is really about attention, and it takes concerted effort to be very consistent with your communication and getting out in front of the right audience through.
Right.
There are a bunch of channels out there that you could use, but we teach you through our program how to be as efficient and effective as possible to get in front of the right audience, so that you can build a course that's valuable and sell that, market it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I know, we talked a little about an offer that you had for people, which I thought was really interesting because it can help people understand, whether this is additional income or whether this is something where, you think you could devote, a lot of time to and make this a source of your income, your full income. If you can describe the offer that you have, I think it's really interesting for people.
Yes, for sure, Michelle. So what you can do if you're listening to this podcast right now, if you're watching on YouTube, head over to nerddigital.com/money and you. And what you'll see there is you'll see this calculator that we've used internally with our clients to predict how much we're going to make with our course launches. And you can download this sheet. And what this sheet will allow you to do, this calculator, is it allow you to estimate how much money you could earn today with a course, given your existing audience. And so what you can do is you can just plug in a few numbers. I think there's like 3 numbers that you're going to change on the sheet, and then it'll calculate everything for you and show you, okay, you could make this amount of revenue if you have an audience of this size, your course price is at this amount, and the average open rate, let's say, of your emails is X. Right, you plug in a few numbers, and then it'll spit out a number so that you can actually look at it and say, okay, cool, interesting. My audience is this size. It looks here like the sheet tells me that I could make 50,000 or 100,000 or 20,000, whatever it is. And then from there, you could say, okay, how likely is it that I could actually pull this off?
Mm-hmm.
Given my existing skill set or my team or whatever resources that I have, should I go for this or should I not?
Yeah.
So I'll make that available for you and your audience, Michelle, and I think it can be very helpful.
Thank you so much. This has been so interesting. The time went way too fast. You're a wealth of knowledge. So I really hope people will get in touch with you and learn more about how you can help them to create and market and deliver their own courses. So, a lot of us go around saying, gosh, I know so much about this. I really should teach it. Well, here's your chance. So can you tell people, should they go to nerddigital.com? Are there some other avenues to reach you and connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say that's the best way. Go to nerddigital.com. Remember, go to /money and you, grab that sheet, and that'll get you on the right path to figuring out, what are you probably sitting on in terms of opportunity right now for a course? And in there, I'll probably link a video so you can learn more about our training and our offers that can, accelerate your learning much faster. Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here all the way from Toronto, and we really appreciate your knowledge and listeners, I hope you will get in touch with Marcio, because there's a lot more to talk about. So thank you again. This has been wonderful. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Listeners, thank you for being here. We love having you on the Money and You Show, and you will find us streaming every Monday night at 7 at ubngo.com, and then on all the podcast platforms, whatever you listen to, and on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel and Facebook page. So reach out to me, Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com if you have any specific questions following the show, and we'd love to hear your money challenges, your money, struggles that you'd like some information on. Maybe we'll just find you the perfect guest for whatever you're challenged with. And so we love reviews, we love subscribers, so it really helps us to keep going and to build the show. So if you're so inclined, please go ahead and subscribe to the Limit Free Life Money and You Show. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you next week.